Okay, so with that, I think that it is 2 o'clock. So I'm going to say hello and welcome to everybody that's arrived so far. I know people will be trickling in as I go through the logistics here. But welcome to this latest installment of the AGU Webinars Professional Development Series. This week, it's going to be featuring Lisa Balbes of Balbes Consultants. I'm Nathaniel Janick, Career Services Coordinator here at AGU, and I will be your host for today's webinar, as well as the presenter, titled Changing Gears, Changing Lanes, Managing Change in and Out of the Workplace. So just a few logistics before we really dive into the material. Throughout the session, we'll be using some of GoToWebinar's tools. So if you see that dashboard, you'll note that there's a few items. You'll see handouts down there. So there are handouts available. We have a copy of the slides and then also a list of resources so that you can take a look at those after the webinar is over. And you can download those at any time throughout. We also will be having Q&A at the end of the session, but you can ask your questions at any point during the presentation. At the end of it all, we're going to do our best to get through as many questions as possible. And if we don't make it through all of them, we'll take a look at what we have and do our best to get to everyone afterwards, after it's all over with. We do have a few free, like open response questions. And for those, you're going to use the question box. The same question box that you use to ask your questions, you'll be using to answer some of our questions. We do also have a few polls, and when we hit those polls, it'll just pop up on your screen if it is a poll. We have some hand-raising things where we're going to ask the audience to raise their hand. The hand-raising icon is just like a little yellow hand. If you see it, go ahead and raise your hand. Let me know that you found it. We'll see. Okay, all right. It looks like people have raised it and already been putting it down. So, all right, good. Awesome. All right, so with all of that said, oh, one last thing. This is going to be recorded, so it'll be available a few days after we're done. We usually have to cut a little bit off the beginning and a little bit off the end. So you will get a link to the recording a few days later once we have a chance to do whatever we need to editing-wise. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lisa to introduce herself and introduce our agenda for the day.
Okay, thanks, Nathaniel. As he said, my name is Lisa Balbes. I'm actually a PhD chemist. I've been a freelance consultant for over 26 years now, mainly doing technical writing and editing, and also spending a lot of time teaching scientists how to manage their careers, both doing webinars like this and traveling around different places. I got to meet a few of you at my first AGU meeting last fall, which was a lot of fun. It was a very interesting conference, and I'm looking forward to maybe meeting some more of you in DC this December. So if this will work. There we go. Okay, we have figured out the technology. I can advance slides. Or maybe we both did it.
Yeah, we got it, yeah.
We got it, okay. So let's go through the agenda just a little bit. We're going to talk about, excuse me, we're going to start by talking about how you identify change, when changes are coming, hopefully not being surprised by them. We're going to talk a little bit about things that you can do about yourself and identifying how you react to change, your personality type, those kinds of things. And then we'll look at the relationship between the two of them. So how you react to change, how maybe you wish you reacted to change, and some things that you can do to make things better. And then we're going to wrap up with several case studies. So some specific examples of people who are experiencing change in their professional lives. And we'll talk about how they addressed it or how they should address it. And hopefully we will have lots of questions from you about change and how we can, we'll try to answer those as well.
Yeah, great. So okay. Our first audience activity here, I want you to think about what word or phrase first comes to mind when you think about change. So go ahead and type your responses into the question box. And I'm going to read a few of them out loud. So somebody says exciting. Another person it looks like says we need more of it. Kim thinks of opportunity when it comes to change.
These are all really positive.
Yeah, very, very positive.
That is
When I
not what I
asked,
expected.
yeah, when I asked somebody yesterday, the first thing that came to their mind was climate change. Overwhelmed? Yes, there we
Yeah.
go. Overwhelmed. That's how a lot of us feel, I think. But yes, it can be both exciting and overwhelming. And so, thanks for the responses, everyone. We're going to go into this first part here. What is change? And I'm going to start with a very cliche way of handling it and talk about the Merriam-Webster definition of change. It's the act or instance of making or becoming different. So different is probably the thing that pops out the most, but there's a few other words going on here. First off, we have that act or instance. Sometimes change can be something that you're actively doing. It can be something that is requiring an action to take place. People have agency. But sometimes it might just be an event or just a single moment. It can also be making something different or becoming different. Sometimes you are actively changing something, a system maybe, or sometimes you yourself are the one experiencing the change. So there's a lot of different things. There's no one clear definition of what it can be. Change can be long or short term. It can be something that you plan for, or you know that you need to make a change, but it can also be something that's just completely unexpected. You can have things that happen at the organizational level, which I'm sure we've all experienced at some point in our careers or in school. But it can also be personal change. It can also be explicit or implicit. Sometimes change is very much out there. We send out a press release. There's a big announcement that gets made that things are going to change. The McRib is back, et cetera, and so on. But sometimes those changes happen without you even noticing them. So it's both sides of that coin. So how does change impact us? We're going to start with the bad here. Obviously, change, because we are creatures of habit, it can cause us stress. That feeling of an uncertainty can lead to confusion. But as many of you responded when you said how you feel about change, it can be good. That's how the saying goes, change is good. Change can mean a new beginning, a starting over. It can mean an improvement or a fixing of something that wasn't working the way that you wanted to. It can mean growth. It can mean a lot of good things. So it's not always just the bad. It's also good.
Okay. And for those of you who were on early and heard Nathaniel talking about poems and forks in the road, that's a lot of what change is. A change will come, and a lot of times it forces you to make a decision, which is where some of that stress comes, but it's a deviation from what you're used to or some outside force acting on you. And as we said, humans like routine. We like to do the same thing over and over again. So especially when it's an unexpected change or something coming upon you suddenly, you resort to the fight or flight mode that you've probably heard about a lot of times, that, oh, I'm going to have to, decide something quickly. What am I going to do? So some people can make decisions really quickly. Some people have to think about things a little bit longer. And when you get surprised by that and sent into this fight or flight mode, it can cause problems, especially in the workplace. Okay, now there we go. Okay.
There.
I'm going to have to go say next slide. There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So fight or flight are two obvious responses to something sudden and unexpected or a big change. So how does this play out in the workplace? Fight, hopefully you're not actually boxing with your boss. I think we all can agree that would be extremely bad. But there's other ways that you can fight change. You can, actively resist new policies. I've worked with people who say, well, this is what they say we have to do, but I'm just not going to do that, which causes all kinds of problems. You can be vocal about how much you dislike the change and either grumble under your breath, or actually be very vocal and tell people this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do this. Or if you decide to, try to be more professional and not express that, you can be, arguing with yourself, because you can say, I know this is bad, I don't want to do this, I don't like this change, yet I'm doing it. And so there's a lot of cognitive dissonance there. which can cause a problem. So if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to deal with this, I'm just going to run away from it, I'm going to do flight mode instead. Excuse me. You can try to ignore the problem, run away from it, so not respond to emails, hide from your boss. Again, probably not the best long-term solution if you want to remain employed. You can put off learning the new skill or doing what would be required to make you move in this new direction that the company wants you to do. Or you can, run away from the whole thing and start looking for a new job. And I think we could argue that's an extreme reaction, but sometimes that's what you have to do. And hopefully you don't do this quickly. Hopefully you take some time to think about this and make sure you're making the right choice with what you're going to do with your career, whether you're going to fight the change, whether you're going to run from it, or whether you're going to embrace it. And there is another option.
Yes, there is. Yeah, when we talk about the fight or flight, sometimes we forget that, the fight or flight is that split-second decision, but the decision sometimes isn't made. So yeah, I put up this picture here of a deer in the headlights. Sometimes when we're faced with change, we're just so completely surprised by it and so caught off guard that we're just paralyzed and we can't make a decision. And so it's really important to know, that this is also a reaction that could take place. You could fight, you could go with the flight, or you could just stay in place and be paralyzed. But in order to move through the change and make the change be a successful event, you really have to be able to move past that paralyzation. And I was telling somebody earlier when I was discussing this slide, it's not always that the paralyzation is such a bad thing. Sometimes it's better to take a deep breath and think about what change you want to make. You just need to make sure that that if you're going to hit pause and say, I need to think through this change, that you aren't that deer in the headlights. All right, so the next slide that I have here, how many of you have ever taken a personality test? So I'm going to ask everybody to go ahead and use that hand raising function here if you've ever taken a personality test before. And it looks like the hands are going up, and it looks like quite a few. See them ticking up. Those of you who have, can you type in the question box what you thought of that experience? Was it positive? Did you get something out of it? Did it feel like you were just going through the motions? Go ahead and type in that question box and let us know what you thought about the personality test that you did. All right, so we've got illuminating and continues to be helpful. Definitely helpful and confirming. Great. All right, I'm gonna pass it back over to Lisa here. Oh yeah, for Myers-Briggs, I get different results sometimes, so it's somewhat unsatisfying. Yes.
Okay. Well, again, I'm impressed with this group because that's not the answers I was expecting. So I'm glad to hear. It looks like a lot of you have taken personality tests and a lot of you got something out of them, and that's great. A lot of times, especially analytical people tend to kind of dismiss those, but they can really provide a lot of value. What they can do is help you understand yourself, understand those patterns and those habits that you tend to fall into. So then you can either guard against those or use them as strengths. So if you use the personality test, they can kind of point out some things that might be strengths or might be weaknesses, so you can work on those in the future. If you do it with other people, a lot of times, everybody at the company will do the personality test, or everybody at a certain level. It gives you a common language, so you can then talk to each other about the change or about whatever else is going on at work, and you all have a common frame of reference. And so really, taking a personality test, even if you don't think you're going to get anything out of it, it is going to make you sit and think about yourself for a little while. And, thinking is always good. Getting more data is always good. We have the next slide lists a few of these tests, and I'm going to try. There we go.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So change. So we thought that we were both going to be able to advance the slides, but it looks like I'm going to get to say next slide. So somebody mentioned the Myers-Briggs test. That's a personality test, has 4 dimensions that it sorts you into. There's a lot of number 4. DISC also sorts according to 4 different characteristics: dominance, influence, steadfastness, and compliance. Strengths Finder is a personality test that you can do on your own. What color is your parachute has a few. There's a number of these on our handouts. So you can go explore a lot of them. A lot of them have kind of an introductory version you can take, free through a website to get a basic understanding. And then if you're really interested, you can go and do a more in-depth analysis. I will comment with the Myers-Briggs. I took it at one point, thought it was interesting, put it away, didn't think about it a whole lot. Like 5 years later, I had to take it again for something else, and I got exactly the same result. And then I thought, gosh, maybe there is something to this. So
Right.
either that or maybe I just don't change with time. But so even if you've taken them, taking them again later on can be enlightening as well to see, have you changed over time? Maybe it's not your environment that's changing, it's you.
Yeah. So speaking of personality tests, we're going to do a quick poll of the audience right now and do a little bit of a self-assessment. In a moment, we're going to launch the poll, but not quite. I want to go through these 3 different types first. So the question is, what is your personal change style? So I've got 3 options here. The first is an originator. You like to challenge the structure and prefer change that is expansive. The second is a pragmatist. You're interested in the structure and interested in how things work, but you don't necessarily want to break the whole thing apart. You are interested in results and outcomes. And then finally, the conservers, who like the system the way that it is and like how things are. And if there is going to be change, they're okay with it, but they'd rather it be in increments rather than just large-scale changes. So we're going to go ahead and launch the poll and go ahead and pick between those 3 which one you like best. And if there we go. All right. So there again are the options: originator, pragmatist, or conserver. We're going to give everyone a few moments to go ahead and answer, and we're going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1, and it looks like I think that sorry for the technical difficulties here. I think that we closed it before people could answer, but that's okay. I'm gonna just go ahead and move on and talk about these 3 for now. And there we go. Hide. Am I showing my screen? Here we go. I'm going to show the screen again. All right.
There we go.
So yeah, so it was already discussed a few slides ago that, yeah, and sorry everybody that wasn't able to select an answer. We have another poll coming up, and I'll launch that one. It'll be okay. But yeah, so if you did want to answer, go ahead and answer in the question box, and I'll keep an eye on that as I'm going through the different types and breaking them down a little bit. In that earlier question, I know somebody answered that Myers-Briggs was always, giving them different results. So it was a little unsatisfying. And really, that can be pretty common. All of these personality tests and all of our personalities are all on a spectrum. It's not like we're the same thing every day. Some days I wake up and I eat cereal. But other days I wake up and I have an egg sandwich. And other days I don't eat breakfast at all. Every day is a little bit different. So depending on how you're facing a situation and how that change is coming at you, you might be a completely different thing on a different day. Like when I was growing up, I was like an INFJ or something, INFJ, and now I'm an ENFP. The last time I took Myers-Briggs, it just depends on kind of the flavor of how you feel. But for these 3 that we're talking about here, we're going to start off with originators. Now, originators, they like risk, they like uncertainty, and sometimes they can really come across as though they want to just change for the sake of change. They don't like the system, They don't care about a better system. They just know that they don't like this one and just want to move past it. They might have some ideas, but because they don't really care for the system and they don't really necessarily accept the existing procedures, they might not understand why those procedures are in place. So their vision might come across as, you know, a little bit unorganized or missing the important details, impractical. However, originators are a great part of implementing a successful change because even though they can, in some situations, want to take things too far, they are going to push that envelope. You know, we've all been in situations where we know that something isn't working, but you know, we get into these rhythms and routines, and we just want to keep with it and just accept how things are. But it's the originators who raise their hand and say, no, I really want this to change. I'm going to let you know that it needs to change, and I'm just going to keep raising my hand until something changes. The next group here, and this is where I think a lot of us tend to lie, or at least imagine ourselves to lie, is the pragmatists. And this is the group that's very results oriented. Especially in a group of scientists, you're going to see that a lot because a lot of the scientific method is all about results. Pragmatists are great when it comes to change because they're interested in the system and interested in possibly implementing change if it will improve the system. So they're willing to listen to the originators, but because they do like the system in some ways, they're willing to be that active listener and listen to what what conservers have to say. You know, they understand that the conservers are conservers for a reason. That the conservers understand, like maybe something that isn't working now was put in place 5 years ago because of another problem. So the conserver knows that there's a reason why that system was in place. So the pragmatist is going to be able to listen to the conservers, you know, sort of institutional memory, and be that bridge, that conduit between the originators and conservers. But you know, just as the originators are important and the pragmatists are important, conservers are also important because they're going to be the ones that pump the brake and keep you from driving off that cliff. They know why the structure works. They might not understand completely how it works, but they know that it does work. So they're going to understand the ins and outs and procedures. They're going to be focused on the details. So whenever you're coming up with a plan, trying to implement a change plan, you know, you really want to rely on your conservers because they're going to be able to identify the pain points where something can break down. Originators can be great for coming up with the vision, but when it comes to the actual implementation, you really need to have conservers. And like I said about the pragmatists, they sort of fall in between and act as sort of the translators between the two. But all three together are part of the unit that can make all these changes happen. As I mentioned at the beginning, you might be all three of these at a different time. You're not always going to be a pragmatist. Like, I know that I'm typically a pragmatist about 5 minutes in, but for the first 5 minutes, I know that I am an originator. And I know that for that first 5 minutes, I will soak up that 5 minutes and come up with all the ideas that I have. But I know that at some point, I have to slow down and, you know, think about things practically and come up with, you know, a change that will actually be able to be either implemented or actually have results instead of just being a change. So all three are definitely central to making a good change. I'm going to pass it back to you, Lisa.
Okay. All right, so we've talked about, you know, what changes, how you might react to it. We've talked about knowing your personality type. Let's start kind of putting all these things together. There's a number of ways that change can, I don't want to say come at you, but change can appear in your work situation or in your personal life. So think about how you're going to put all these pieces together. Maybe you're in a situation where you see a change coming, and so you have some time to prepare. Maybe you start realizing that things are not going as well as they used to. I don't understand. So maybe there's some change going on, but you haven't noticed it. It's been really gradual, and it's just, starting to bother you, but you have to figure out what it is. Sometimes you can see a change happening around you, but you're not sure how to react to it. Ideally, by the time you use some of these strategies that we've talked about, you will be able to identify the change and see a clear way out and know where you're going to go and how you're going to react to this change and get yourself back on a stable footing. Okay, so typically change, there's going to be some starting point to the change. There's going to be a middle, and there's going to be an end. There's going to be, you've heard the term new normal, so you're going to get there, and then there's going to be another change. The only thing constant is change, so you're going to have to get used to dealing with this. So what you want to do is ideally, it's not going to work. Next slide.
You got it.
Thank you. So ideally what you're going to do is, kind of figure out where you are relative to that change. Where am I? How is this change affecting me? How am I going to navigate this change to get to the next stable platform in my life so I can get my balance again before I'm ready to take on the next challenge?
So we've come to the next poll, and so the next one is, which of these is critical to achieving successful change? And I'm launching it, and it has launched. So your options are vision, skills, incentive, resources, and action plan. And I'm sorry, I put that you can select more than one, but now that I look at it, I think that the screen says please select one. So pick which one you think is the most important. All right, and I'm going to give it a few more moments for folks to answer. And obviously, as I see what people are starting to answer, I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1, and share the results. All right, so we've got quite a mix up here. So we got 20% of say vision, another 30% say incentive or resources, and then another 20% say action plan. Surprisingly, nobody picked skills, but I think that if you're having to pick which is the most important, I can see that one falling to the wayside, because if you think about it, everybody has skills. Of course, this was a little bit of an intentionally trick question, because you really need all of them. If you have all of these things put together, then what you wind up with is change. But what happens if you're missing one of them? Well, if you are missing vision, then what you have is confusion. You can have the skills to do something and want to do it and have what you need to do it, and you can even have a plan in place, but if you don't actually know what it is that you want to do, then you're just going to be confused. If you're missing the skill set, then you're going to be anxious. If you've ever been in a situation where you know that you have everything that you need to do, and you even have a plan of how to do it, you know what it is that you need to do. Like, let's say you're working on a research project and you need somebody that has a very specific skill set in a particular set of like modeling software, for example. None of your team has it. So you're anxious because you know that you want to do this, but you know that nobody can do it on your team. Obviously, you're going to be able to fix that in some ways by maybe either getting the skill yourself or finding somebody who has it. But until you do that, it's going to be a pretty anxious project. If you're missing the incentive part and you have everything else, that can have some success, but it's going to be gradual over time. If you don't have anything saying, I need to get this done, I need to get this done by X date, or I actively want to get this done, things will happen, especially if you have an action plan in place and all of the right pieces to get it done other than the incentive. But if there isn't an incentive, it's not going to happen very quickly. If you don't have the resources, you're going to be frustrated. Think about a time like maybe some of you have applied for a research grant and you find out that you weren't awarded all of the grant that you requested. So you know what you want to do, and you have the skills and incentive to do it, and you even sat down and wrote the plan that you submitted to them, but suddenly you find yourself without the resources to accomplish this task that you want to do. That's going to lead to frustration. And then lastly, if you have the vision and you have the skills and you have the incentive and you have the resources and you have just like a great group of people, and you know what you want to do, and you're just going to go out and get things done, but you haven't taken that extra step of figuring out an action plan, then you're going to have false starts. Because what's going to happen is you've got all of this enthusiasm, but you're just blindly running forward. And every time you hit an obstacle, you're going to have to hit the pause button and rethink what direction you're going in. And you're just going to keep on going in that direction until you hit another obstacle. And then once you do that, again, just false start after false start. So if you really want to implement successful change, you need all 5 of these. So, what happens if you're missing some things? What can you do when you get into those situations? So first of all, you want to recognize negative behaviors. When we first hit that change, we're going to be anxious and confused. We're not going to know, what's next. We're going to be uncertain. It's going to make us irritable. We're going to say things that we didn't mean to say. All of these things are negative behaviors, and it's perfectly natural to have them when you experience a change, but you want to recognize when they're happening so that you can nip them in the bud and prevent them from continuing to happen. When things are going well for the change, or people are upbeat and positive, or starting to figure out and see the way through the change and implementing the changes that you want to identify those positive things and reinforce them. Another thing that you want to do, and it's really hard, especially at the beginning of a change, is to be aware of your surroundings. Oftentimes, when a change first happens, you get sort of a tunnel vision. It's that same slide that I showed, the deer in the headlights look. If you get stuck at the beginning and you're having trouble seeing your way around, don't just look at what's in front of you. Look at what's behind you. Look at what's to the left and right. Try to think about things from a different perspective. There's plenty of activities that you can do to help you sort of break free and think about things from a different angle. And then finally, you want to be really careful about falling into a loop. We mentioned many slides ago the idea that as humans, we want the routine. No matter how hard we try, we are going to be creatures of habit, and we're going to gravitate towards the routine. Now, when we're faced with the change, and we gravitate towards this routine, sometimes if we're facing with that change and we're being irritable, we're getting frustrated, we're getting angry all the time, and the change just isn't being solved, whatever problem we're working with, we can accidentally find ourselves in this trap where that fight or flight mode becomes the routine. We're just in full panic mode all the time, and we can't switch it off. So, I put up this picture here. For those of you who've seen Groundhog Day, that's kind of what Groundhog Day is. He's just caught in the same day after day, and can't figure out how to get out of it. So, what should you do in that situation? Well, first off, you want to, check yourself for warning signs. Is this problem that you're working on, is every time you hit it, are you just feeling like you should just quit doing it? Do you feel like none of the things that you're working on, you don't feel like you're actively having any agency over it? Or are you catching yourself like knowing that there's a problem that needs to be solved and needs to be changed, but you're just ignoring it completely? You're just denying it, or are you just going through the motions and just spinning your wheels? If you are having any of these changes, obviously this is the sort of thing that'll happen initially when you experience change. You're going to feel a little bit of this because of those feelings of confusion and anxiety and uncertainty. But if it's happening over a long-term period, you really need to stop. Um, there's an oft attributed to Einstein quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results." As scientists, if you were doing an experiment and you did it over and over and over again, you're actively wanting it to be the same results. But sometimes when we're dealing with change, we get caught in these loops where we just keep on doing the same thing again and again and again. And no matter how many times we get the same result, we expect that that somehow this time we're going to break through that wall. So you want to take a deep breath, take inventory of what you're doing, figure out what you need to get to that next step. Sometimes if you get caught in one of these loops, you are going to have to introduce change into the system to get yourself out of it, just to break up this routine that you've gotten yourself in. That might be getting some exercise in, changing what your day-to-day routine is so that your schedule is different, so it sort of breaks you out of whatever routine you were doing, doing something that you might not normally do mentally, anything to sort of break out of the cycle. You have more, I'm sure, to add here to this one, Lisa.
One of the other things that I had thought about in looking at this, one of the things that you can do when you get, caught up in that change and you're all stressed and, this is horrible, it's the worst thing I've ever gone through. Sometimes you can stop and ask yourself, is this going to matter in 5 years? Is this going to matter in 6 months? Is this really as big of a deal as I think it is? Or is this just something that, yeah, it's a pain to go through, but I'll go through it and move on? And sometimes just that little, am I going to care about this outcome in 5 years can help you get a sense of perspective on how big this change really is and if you need to be that anxious about it.
Yeah, and another thing here, we talk at AGU with our programs a lot about mentoring networks, and you don't need to just have one mentor. You can have a lot of different mentors, but in these situations where you're experiencing change that you can't get through, talk to your mentors, talk to your research advisor, talk to your colleagues, and don't be afraid to talk to them, because everybody has gone through some sort of situation at some point, whether or not it's at work, at school, at home. We've all experienced changes, and so they might not have the answers for you, but they will at least be able to let you listen. And sometimes just talking out a problem out loud with somebody else sort of can allow you to see what the solution is.
Yeah, sometimes just having to explain it to somebody else, you have to think about what's important and what are the key factors, and then you know what? Now I see.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to move to this last slide, which is before we go to the case studies, which is what do you need to get to that next step when you're caught in that mode? And essentially, this list here, it's not too much of a secret, but all of these 5 items are in alignment with those same 5 things that I brought up at the beginning. Sometimes in order to solve a problem, if you look at facts or data or models, if you look at examples of how somebody handled it in a previous problem, that might give you the resources to get to the next step.
We're scientists, we like data.
Yeah. Figuring out clearly where it is that you want to go, like just sitting down, getting out a piece of paper and saying what outcome I'm wanting from this, having the vision can also help. If you have that vision and know what it is you're trying to achieve, starting to figure out and breaking it down into chunks, breaking a plan out into chunks can help you get to a point where you can figure out how to get from A all the way to Z. It's not like A to Z is a one-step process unless you're going through a wormhole. It's an A, B, C, D, E, all these steps to get to wherever it is that you need to go. So you need to sit down there and write out the plan. The motivation piece, just so you can remind yourself that maybe this isn't as big of a deal. You can also remind yourself of why this work matters to you. Why is science important to you? Why do I wake up and go to my job every day? For me, it's being able to do these sorts of webinars and help folks out with whatever problems they're dealing with their professional development. I like that. It motivates me. It helps me move forward. Also, the last one here is learn a new skill if you need it, or find someone who has it already, because chances are if you need a skill to get to the next step in a change, somebody probably has that skill. You just need to find the right person and ask them. And so with that, we're going to move on to our case studies, and we're at 2:40 right now, so we're going to try to zip through these. If you have questions, feel free to ask them during the case studies if you want to type them out. But with that, I'm going to start us off here. So the first person I have here is Joan. So 9 months ago, Joan landed a job with a company that works on remote sensors. About 6 months ago, her company was acquired and the rest of her team left the company. And now she's the most senior person on the team. How can she deal with this change, Lisa?
Okay. So I like this one. This is good and bad. So she's now the most senior person on the team. She knows a lot about how things have been done in the past. Maybe she knows why things were done the way they were, which can be valuable information for the new bosses. So she's very valuable to them. However, they're going to want to do things, maybe in a different way, and they're going to want to change the environment or the culture of the company. And that's going to be the issue there, is that this new culture is not what she thought she had signed up for. And the sidebar is, did she have any inkling that this was coming when she applied for this job? Because the acquisition happened 3 months after she got hired, so hopefully she sort of knew it was coming. At this point, it's a part of it is going to be a wait and see what the culture is like of the new company. If they're going to hire people and put people under her, this could be a great, benefit to her career. But she's going to have to, see what the new culture is, see if that's something that she wants to be in. But maybe in the back of her mind, be working on her exit plan. If everybody else on the team left, maybe there's some major thing that has changed and she's going to want to leave too. So she needs to be preparing herself in case that happens.
Yeah. So this one, a big part of it is coming up with that vision and the action plan. All right. So the next one I have here is Mark, and Mark doesn't like his job. At first he didn't mind because he knew it was only temporary, but now he's sure of it. Mark's spouse is about to complete grad school. She already has a job offer that will start once she's completed her dissertation. He knows that he will be relocating soon, but thinks leaving his current workplace now will be worth it. Still, it's going to be exhausting to go on the job hunt twice in such a short period. So what should Mark do here?
Okay. Well, he's one, he knows this change is coming because he knows they're going to move. It sounds like she's already accepted this new position. So the good news is that he's going to get out of the bad situation. He knew his current job was temporary, so I'm really hoping that when he did the job search for the job he's in now, he kept some of those connections and has, kept that momentum going, and he's not starting from scratch again. It's probably not worth it for him to, quit his job now and look for another really short-term position. 3 moves in a very short period of time would look bad, so he's just going to have to, deal with the bad position until it's time to move. But he can, get excited and motivate himself by knowing that he's going to get into a better position.
Yeah, and he definitely has the incentive. Like he knows he doesn't like his job and he knows that he has to move. So looking for a new job is certainly great, but like we were talking with the list of 5, he clearly doesn't have an action plan right now. If he's just sort of in that mode where he knows that he needs to move, so he's just going in whichever direction he decides upon. That sort of false start thing. So yeah, I think that's going to be probably the end result if he tries to find a new job in between the relocation. So the next one that I've got here is Tanya. Tanya's got a little bit better situation. Tanya's about to finish a postdoc position at a prestigious research institution. She was lucky enough to get an offer for a tenure track position at a smaller school that focuses on undergraduate education. Her current supervisor at the research institution has just informed her that the lab has found funding for a permanent position and has encouraged her to apply.
So yeah, she's in great shape. She's got two, pretty solid, but very different opportunities, and she's going to have to decide which path she's going to take. The first thing, again, being a scientist, she's going to get the data and figure out how permanent is permanent. Is this just until the next grant? Is this a 5-year, 10-year position? Because she got the opportunity at a tenure track small school, I'm thinking that she was applying for those. So I'm thinking that, she thought she wanted to be a teacher at one of these small schools. And so she's going to have to, kind of do some self-reflection and, figure out, okay, I was applying for jobs at small schools that would let me be a teacher. Is that really what I want to do? Do I really want to be a teacher at a PUI where I get to work closely with the students? Or is it really the research that interests me and I want to stay at this research institution in this new opportunity? So in her case, it's more that, self-reflection and figure out what is it that I really want to do with my life, which is going to cause me the most joy in the long run, and then go after that one.
Yeah. All right. So the final one I have here is Sophia, and I put up a little XKDC or XKCD. I think I can't even get it right off my head here. So Sophia's dilemma. Sophia has a tenure track position, but doesn't have tenure yet. The university recently restructured to group the earth science and ocean science departments together. And in the process of this, the two departments need to reevaluate their curricula to make both groups happy and in alignment. Sophia wants to get involved, but with so many professors with seniority in the discussion, she isn't sure how to make her mark and how to, start that conversation.
Okay, so there's a couple of things that she can do here. One is to find out, who's in charge, who's overseeing this whole merger, and, let them know that she's willing to participate and contribute to this change. Before she does that, she should probably, think about what unique skills or insights does she have that she can bring to the discussion. What does she know that other people don't know? She's probably relatively new to the department, so did she maybe come from a school where these two departments were already merged, so she can bring that perspective and that information? So once she figures out what her skills or knowledge is that she has that would make her a valuable member of this team, then she can go talk to the leader and say, hey, I'm really interested. Here's what I have to offer. Here's what I have to bring to the table. I would like to help work on this. And I don't know very many places that if you came and said you were excited and you had a passion for something, that they would say, no, we don't want you.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Well, that's actually the end of our case studies. So at this point, we're going to move on to questions, and the question box is still open. We have 13 minutes, so feel free to ask any that you have. All right, so the first question that I have here on my list is, do you have any suggestions of, like books that I might read to help me with this idea of change? I'm going to let you field that one. I have some ideas that I already put in the handouts.
Oh, okay. And I'm going to walk over to my bookshelf. Yeah, books about change management. I don't know of books. One of the resources that I like, which is something that I never thought I would read, is the Harvard Business Review. And they publish articles, several times a week, and there's a lot in there about change. There's a nice book by John Cotter called Our Iceberg is Melting. So it's a little short book about change and how to deal with change.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably two of my favorite resources.
Okay, great. Yes, I put some ones that I had been looking at. One that I didn't put, and I'll get the name wrong, but I just thought about it. It's called Sacred Cows Make the Best Burgers. I think it's a cute title, but yeah, it's. I haven't actually made it through the entire book, but the title alone is just worth it. So I have a few more questions here. So how do you manage change when your decision or response to the change is also going to be dependent on other people and not just yourself? What if I have sort of responsibilities that I also have to consider when responding to the change?
Yeah, you're just throwing them all to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that usually happens. I mean, there's very few things that really are only dependent on you. You have to talk to the other people, the other stakeholders, um, talk about what, not only what the options are, but what are the different parameters. Well, this would be the best option if this were the case or if that were the case. Finding out what the deadlines are, so when the decision has to be made, and then setting up times to talk to people and give them time to think about things and get back to you. Some people need time to reflect on things. They can't make a decision right away. But you definitely want to involve the other people, especially when it comes to, significant changes in your work life. If you're going to, accept a new position, or if you're going to start, looking for a new position, you probably want to discuss that with what's the politically correct term now? Your accompanying partner?
Your significant other, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was somebody a few months ago that was, I mean, in the sciences, we call it the two-body problem. The situation where,
Opportunity.
mm-hmm.
Two-body
Right, the
opportunity.
two-body opportunity. Yes, exactly. And you have to start looking at it like that. It can be difficult to get through, but if you don't sit down and have the conversation of, what will we do if we face this? Situations like that, you really have to prepare for the change rather than waiting for it to happen, I think. And it's also, you mentioned the stakeholders thing, but you really have to think not just about the stakeholders that are the obvious ones, but really think about all of the stakeholders, because there might be people, it might seem like something that you can just do with you and the team that you're working with, but it might involve like a completely different group that you hadn't even considered. And by not including them, you might make it to the end of your change and then have the whole thing train wreck just because you forgot one particular stakeholder. So yeah, you want to ask all those diagnostic questions pretty early. So the next question I have here, and I'll field this one, is how do you manage the emotional aspects of change, the stress, frustration, anger, or even sadness? So, I mean, really, there's a lot of different ways that it can be managed. I know for me, for example, I can have pretty severe seasonal affective disorder, and I know that it's happening. I know that it's going to happen, so I keep an eye out for when the warning signs signal, and when those warning signs hit, I have an action plan. I know what I need to do to get myself out of it. Sometimes the action plan doesn't work as well as I'd like, but at least having it allows me to have something to fall back on in case it does happen. It's like sort of a break in case of emergency. What I typically do in those situations where I can see it starting to happen is I start with the easy one of, go to sleep earlier and force myself to go to sleep. But then I also start waking up at least an hour earlier whenever it happens. Because if it's happening in the winter and I'm going to wake up in the dark anyway, what's the difference if I wake up an hour earlier, which forces me to go to sleep? So you just have to find like silly ways to sort of break it all up. We say count to 10, but taking a deep breath and counting to 10 can mean the world. Yeah.
I think just feeling like you have something, something that you can do makes a big difference, even if the thing that you're doing doesn't make a difference, if that makes sense. Yeah. Feeling like you have a little bit control can be helpful. One of the things that I know works for a lot of people is to make sure that you have multiple aspects to your life. You have lots of different things going on. So if your research isn't going well, at least your volunteer work is going well. Or, if you're having a problem in your personal life, you can go, pet the animals at the shelter or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, well, my research isn't going well, but at least I, put on this great event for my professional organization.
All right.
So that can help,
Mm-hmm.
as well. You've got good things going on in part of your life, at least, even if some other part isn't quite going as well as you would have hoped.
Yeah. So another one here, and I feel like I have never experienced this, but I'm sure that you probably have interacted with people who have. Well, actually, not just people, but anyway, I'll get to the question here. Some changes carry a certain stigma. Example, leaving academia. How do I maintain confidence in my decisions and responses to the change?
Oh gosh, I've never dealt with that one at all.
Yeah, I know.
So the good, yeah. So leaving academia is one of the ones that the people who are in academia, I shouldn't pick on them all. A lot of the people who are in academia, that's all they've ever seen, so they think that's all there is. And I don't want to say it's not their fault, but they don't know what else is out there. And, of all the people, I deal with a lot of people who are going into non-traditional careers, and so many of them say, I can't believe I didn't know this was out here. This is wonderful. This is what I was born to do. So it can be hard in the transition, but look for people who are, who have gone where you're going to go. So you don't want to be talking to only people who are where you've come from, but look for people who've successfully navigated that change and are in that, industrial position or that government position, and talk to them. And there's very few people that I talk to. I can't remember even any specifically who said, oh gosh, it was terrible. I wish I'd stayed in academia. Almost everyone is, this is great. I love this. And the ones who really miss teaching will go, do adjunct or something on the side, or they'll do mentoring. And so they get that teaching need met another way. The attitudes are changing, and that's one of the things that I'm really trying to encourage people to, say there's lots of different things out there. You just need to find what's going to work for you and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it well is the best way to show people that, there's lots of things that you can do.
Yeah. Let's see. I've got another one here. Thinking long term. How can I ensure that I am not making the same mistakes every time I am faced with a change in my professional life or career? So I'll field this one. For me, it's a journal, and I mean it seems silly. I don't normally journal, but if I know that I'm going through a transition period, I will journal, and I'll write down, just little sentences about how I'm feeling about this or that, to remind myself of why I'm making the change. And also I can look back on it afterwards, because it's usually once you get out of the change that you have that, whole 20/20 hindsight thing. So once you've gotten out and things are back to normal and stable, you can look back and review what you did and say, oh man, I did that completely wrong, but this is what I was thinking. So you can identify those same things, and if you do it a couple of times, you start to notice it. And sometimes I still wind up doing the same mistakes that I always do, but something that happens less is the sort of emotional baggage that goes with it. I might behave the same way, but I don't have the same emotional reaction, because I know at least what emotions I shouldn't be trying to, or what emotions I should not exhibit. Do you have any other points to add on to that one?
Yeah, I mean that's hard, because like you said, we do tend to fall into patterns. Again, identifying them and saying, oh, I've made this mistake 2 or 3 times. I'm not going to make that mistake again. But then you don't want to go too far the other way, because sometimes you'll be reactive and say, okay, I'm going to do something completely different this time, and that may not work out either.
Yeah.
So, and again, I would caution, calling it a mistake. Sometimes I've done things and I get through them. I'm like, you know what? That was horrible, but I learned something. I learned I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you learned something from it and you grew from the experience, then you just take that and move on to the next one
Mm-hmm.
and say,
Yeah.
okay, it was a learning experience. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah. So I don't have a final slide here, but I just want to, we've talked about a lot, and I hope that everybody found this useful. I would really hammer home because that one slide, and I'll actually bring it back up. The one about the vision and the vision, skills, resources. That one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this one is really useful to think about, and I hope that everybody sort of, if you take away one thing, take away this, and take away that idea that if you're missing some of these pieces, uh, especially especially all of them, yeah, it can be really helpful to have them all and make sure that you have them all, and it can also
And
be really helpful to just sit down and take inventory of everything that you need to before you try to actually implement the change.
yeah, using it as a framework to think through what you're going to do can be helpful.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, it's 3 o'clock. So I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you for presenting, Lisa.
Thank you
Uh,
for inviting me.
yeah. I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation as much as we enjoyed giving it, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful weekend.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Bye.